Come to me, human. We are destined to merge in the stars. The night was like any other, rain-soaked, gray, and heavy. But when Jake opened his balcony door to the storm, he didn't expect her, a radiant alien with skin that shimmered like moonlight and eyes as deep as the cosmos. She wasn't here by chance. No, she had come for him. And when their gazes locked, everything in Jake's quiet, solitary life began to shatter. Arya, a being from a distant galaxy, whispered words that would haunt him forever. You are the one. But she wasn't just looking for a human to share a moment. She was seeking something far deeper, something that could merge their souls, forever altering the course of their lives. The bond between them was undeniable, impossible to resist, but what did it mean? And why did she say it was a destiny for them to unite in the stars? If you want to know how this strange, unearthly connection unfolds, subscribe now to my channel. Don't miss out on the thrilling, otherworldly adventure waiting for you. It's completely free. Click that bell icon for more cosmic journeys like this one. The rain came down in heavy sheets, drenching Seattle in a silver-gray haze. From the balcony of his small apartment overlooking Puget Sound, Jake watched the water streak across the city like liquid static. Neon lights from downtown flickered faintly in the distance, their glow fractured by the endless drizzle. The air smelled of salt and damp concrete, carried on a wind that howled through the streets below. It was a night that felt heavy, restless, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. Jake leaned against the railing, his dark hair plastered to his forehead from mist. He was 28, a freelance coder who spent more time staring at screens than talking to people. His life wasn't bad, just quiet. Too quiet, maybe. His parents had split when he was a kid, leaving him to bounce between their houses until he'd carved out this solitary existence for himself. The apartment was his refuge, a cluttered mess of monitors, coffee mugs, and half-read sci-fi novels. Tonight, though, even that felt hollow. He just wrapped up a grueling project, but instead of relief, there was only this nagging emptiness, like a piece of him was missing, and he didn't know why. He exhaled, his breath fogging in the cold, wet air. That's when he saw her. At first, he thought it was a trick of the rain, a shimmer in the downpour, a reflection off the glass. But then the shape moved. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, graceful, cutting through the storm like it didn't belong to this world. Jake squinted, his heart thudding against his ribs. A figure emerged from the shadows below, stepping onto the street outside his building. The rain didn't touch her. Droplets curved around her form as if they were afraid to land, bending away in midair. She glowed, softly at first, then brighter, pulses of white-blue light tracing intricate patterns along her skin. It wasn't human skin, not quite. It shimmered like liquid moonlight, smooth and iridescent, marked with delicate designs that seemed alive, shifting with every breath she took. Jake's grip tightened on the railing. She was tall, slender, her silver hair cascading down her back like a river of starlight. Her clothes, if you could call them that, were a thin, flowing material that clung to her curves, translucent in the rain's glow. And then she looked up. Her eyes locked onto his, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. They weren't human eyes. Too large, too deep, like twin pools of midnight filled with distant galaxies. He couldn't look away. It was like she was staring straight through him, into something he didn't even know was there. "You," she said, her voice cutting through the storm. It wasn't just sound. It echoed inside his skull, layered and melodic, like a chorus of whispers speaking as one. "You are the one." Jake blinked, his mouth dry. Who are you?" His voice came out rough, shaky, barely audible over the rain. He wasn't sure why, but her words hit him like a punch to the chest. Not a question, but a truth that had been waiting to be spoken. She tilted her head, her glowing eyes never leaving his. "I am Arya," she said softly, her name rolling off her tongue like a prayer. "And I have crossed the void to find you." His mind reeled. Cross the void? What the hell did that mean? He'd met off-worlders before, diplomats and traders from the colonies, their ships docking at the spaceport an hour outside the city. Seattle was a hub for that kind of thing. But Arya wasn't like them. She didn't feel like a visitor. She felt inevitable, important, like she'd been drawn here by something bigger than either of them. Before he could process it, she moved, gliding up the fire escape toward his balcony with impossible grace. Jake stumbled back, his heart hammering. "Wait, what are you doing?" he stammered, but she was already there, stepping onto the balcony as if gravity didn't apply to her. Up close, she was even more unreal. Her skin pulsed faintly with light, the patterns swirling along her arms and down her sides. She was close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her, a stark contrast to the cold rain soaking his clothes. "I felt you," she said, her voice softer now, almost a whisper, across the stars through the silence. "Your essence," it called to me. "My essence." Jake's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say. Her words sounded insane, but the way she looked at him, like he was the only thing in the universe that mattered, made his chest ache with something he couldn't name. Fear? Longing? Both? She took a step closer, her bare feet silent against the wet metal of the balcony. The glow in her skin flickered, matching the rhythm of her breath. "You are unlike the others," she said. "I felt you, Jake, across the void. And now that I am here, understand why." He froze. She knew his name. He hadn't told her his name. How do you know who I am?" His voice cracked, but he didn't back away. He couldn't. There was something magnetic about her, pulling him in despite the alarm bells screaming in his head. Arya's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Because you're the one who answered." She reached out, her hand hovering inches from his chest. The air between them buzzed, alive with static. "I want us to become one." The words hung there, heavy and impossible, like a promise wrapped in a threat. Jake's pulse thundered in his ears. The rain swirled around her, framing her in mist, and for a moment, the city faded away. There was only her voice, her eyes, and the weight of what she'd just said. Become one? What did that even mean? His mind raced, but deep down, in a place he didn't dare look too closely at, he wanted to know. He needed to know. "Come inside," he said finally, his voice low and unsteady. It wasn't an invitation. It was a reflex, like letting her in was the only thing that made sense. Turning away felt wrong, like rejecting a piece of himself he hadn't even realized was missing. Arya nodded, stepping past him into the apartment. As she brushed by, her arm grazed his, and her hip pressed lightly against his side. The contact was accidental, but it hit him like a jolt of electricity. His hand twitched, brushing against the curve of her waist where her glowing patterns pulsed brighter at his touch. Her skin was warm, impossibly soft, and the heat spread through his fingers, up his arm, straight to his core. Jake sucked in a sharp breath, his face flushing. He yanked his hand back, but the sensation lingered, a tingling warmth that made his pulse race faster. She paused in the doorway, turned to look at him. "Your body, it reacts to me," she said, her tone curious, almost innocent. "Why?" Jake swallowed hard, his cheeks burning. It's nothing," he muttered, stepping past her into the dim light of his apartment. But it wasn't nothing. His skin still buzzed where he'd touched her, and his mind was spinning with questions he didn't know how to ask. Who was she? What did she want? And why the hell did he feel like his whole life had just shifted in the span of 5 minutes? The rain pounded against the windows, a steady drumbeat that matched the chaos in his chest. Arya stood in the middle of his living room, her glow casting soft shadows across the cluttered space. She didn't belong here, not in this messy, human world of takeout boxes and flickering screens. And yet, as she turned to him, her eyes searching his, Jake felt it, a pull, deep and undeniable, like she'd unlocked something inside him he'd never known was there. He didn't sleep that night. How could he? The woman standing in his apartment wasn't just a stranger. She was a mystery, a force, a question he couldn't stop chasing. And as the storm raged on outside, Jake knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, there was no going back. The rain hadn't let up. It battered the windows of Jake's apartment, a relentless rhythm that filled the silence as he stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter. Arya was still in the living room, her faint glow casting a soft halo across the cluttered space. She moved like she belonged there, her fingers brushing over the spines of his sci-fi novels, her head tilting as she studied the glowing monitors on his desk. Every motion was fluid, deliberate, like she was mapping out this strange human world she'd stepped into. Jake watched her, his chest tight, his mind a tangle of questions he didn't know how to voice. He'd invited her in, or at least he hadn't stopped her from staying. The thought of sending her back into the storm felt wrong, like slamming a door on something he couldn't unsee. But now that she was here, standing barefoot on his hardwood floor, he wasn't sure what to do. She wasn't human. That much was obvious. The way she glowed, the way her voice echoed in his head, it wasn't normal. And yet, there was something about her that pulled at him, a quiet ache he couldn't shake. So, he said finally, his voice low, rough from nerves, "You're not from around here, I'm guessing." Arya turned to him, her silver hair catching the dim light. Her eyes locked onto his, and Jake felt that same jolt from the balcony, like she was peeling back layers he didn't even know he had. "I am Netherian," she said, her voice carrying that strange melodic echo. "From the Star Veil territories. My kind we rarely leave. We do not bond with other species. It is forbidden." Jake blinked, leaning back against the counter. "Forbidden?" He tried to keep his tone casual, but it came out shaky. "Then why are you here?" Her expression shifted. Something flickered across her face, too quick to read. Sadness? Longing? He couldn't tell. She stepped closer, her bare feet soundless against the floor. "I heard you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Your soul, it reached for me across the void, through the quiet. I felt you, Jake." His breath hitched. It sounded crazy, impossible. Souls didn't just reach across space. And yet, standing there with her glowing softly in the half-light, it didn't feel like a lie. "You felt me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "What does that even mean?" Arya stopped a foot away, her gaze steady. "Netherians don't love the way humans do. We don't choose partners for affection or comfort. We bond completely. Mind, body, soul. We become one." Her voice dipped lower, reverent, almost trembling. "But that bond only forms when the universe wills it. A thread, invisible, pulls two souls together. One cannot search for it. One can only answer." Jake's heart pounded against his ribs. He didn't know what to say. Her words were heavy, pressing down on him like a physical weight. "And you think I'm the one who answered?" he asked, his throat tight. Her lips curved into a faint, fragile smile. "Because you are." She reached out, her hand hovering near his chest again, just like on the balcony. The air crackled faintly, warm and electric. "I felt your essence long before I saw you. It called to me, and now I am here." He stared at her, his mind spinning. "Why me?" The question slipped out, raw and unguarded. He wasn't special, just a guy who coded apps and drank too much coffee. Why would someone like her cross galaxies for him? Arya didn't answer right away. Instead, she closed the distance between them, her hand brushing his arm as she moved past him to the counter. The touch was light, accidental, but it sent a shiver racing down his spine. Her skin grazed his, warm and impossibly smooth, and for a split second, he felt the heat of her body, her side pressing softly against his as she reached for an empty mug on the counter. The glow of her markings flared brighter where they touched, and Jake's breath caught, his pulse spiking. He stepped back quickly, his face flushing, but the sensation lingered, a tingling warmth that made his head swim. She turned, holding the mug, her head tilted in curiosity. "Your heart, it races," she said, her tone innocent but piercing. "Is this how humans feel connection?" Jake swallowed hard, running a hand through his damp hair. "Yeah, something like that," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. He didn't know how to explain it. The way her touch lit him up, the way his body reacted without his permission. It wasn't just attraction. It was deeper, stranger, like she was already under his skin. He cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "So this bond, what happens if we—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The idea was too big, too wild. Arya set the mug down, her eyes softening. If we bond, we merge. Our minds become one. Our souls intertwine. You will feel everything I feel, and I will feel you. There will be no separation. She paused, her voice trembling slightly. But it is absolute. Once it begins, it cannot be undone. Jake exhaled shakily, his hands gripping the counter harder. That's a lot, he said, forcing a weak laugh. I mean, I barely know you. Her smile faded, replaced by something quieter, more vulnerable. I know, she whispered. And yet, I have known you longer than you realize. Before he could ask what she meant, she stepped closer again, this time deliberately. She reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist, light but intentional. The contact sent a rush of heat through him, and he froze, unable to pull away. Her markings pulsed, the light spreading from her fingertips to his skin, faint but real. For a moment, he felt something, a whisper of her presence, warm and vast, brushing against the edges of his mind. It wasn't intrusive. It was comforting. Like a piece of him he'd lost had just clicked back into place. What was that? He breathed, his voice hoarse. Arya's eyes shimmered, wide and searching. A glimpse, she said, of what we could be. He didn't move. He couldn't. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, charged with something he didn't understand. And if I say no, he asked, though a part of him already knew he wouldn't. Her hand lingered on his wrist, her touch soft but electric. Then I leave, she said simply, and the thread remains unanswered. Jake's chest tightened. The idea of her walking out, of this strange, impossible thing ending before it even started, felt wrong. He didn't know her, not really, but the thought of losing her made his stomach twist. Stay, he said, the words slipping out before he could stop it. Just stay. Arya's glow brightened, just for a moment, and she nodded. As you wish. The next few hours blurred together. Jake didn't know what he'd expected. Maybe awkward small talk or more cryptic alien talk. But it wasn't this. Arya was curious, almost childlike in how she explored his world. She sat on the couch, watching an old sci-fi movie with him, her head tilted as spaceships zipped across the screen. She tried a sip of his coffee, her face scrunching up at the bitterness, and Jake couldn't help but laugh. Not a fan, he asked. It tastes like regret, she said, setting the mug down with a grimace. He grinned, the tension easing for the first time since she'd arrived. But it wasn't all light. There were moments, quiet, heavy moments, when her eyes would drift to him and he'd feel it again, that pull, deep and undeniable. Once, as he reached past her to grab the remote, their hands brushed, and her fingertips lingered against his. The warmth of her skin sent a shiver through him, sharp and sudden, and he pulled back, his face hot. She didn't say anything, but her glow flickered, and he swore he saw a faint smile. By the time the movie ended, the rain had softened to a drizzle, and Jake's head was buzzing, not from exhaustion, but from her. She was a paradox, otherworldly, yet here, sitting on his couch like she'd always been part of his life. And the more he watched her, the more he felt it. Whatever she'd started, it wasn't stopping. It was growing. The drizzle outside had settled into a soft patter, a gentle hum against the windows as the night deepened. Jake sat on the couch, the flickering glow of the TV long since faded to black. Arya was beside him, her knees tucked under her, her silver hair spilling over the cushions like a pool of liquid starlight. The movie was over, but neither of them had moved. The air between them felt thick, alive with something unspoken. Jake's hands rested on his thighs, his fingers twitching as he fought the urge to look at her. Every time he did, that pull, the one she'd started on the balcony, grew stronger, tugging at him like a tide he couldn't resist. She broke the silence first. Your world is strange, she said, her voice soft but carrying that layered echo. She gestured to the empty coffee mug on the table. Bitter drinks, stories of ships that fly. It's so different from mine. Jake glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, well, yours doesn't sound like a picnic either. Starveo, right? What's it like? Arya's glow dimmed slightly, her eyes drifting to the window. It is beautiful, she said. Skies of violet and gold. Towers of glass that hum with light. But it is cold, not in temperature, but in feeling. My people, we do not connect as you do. We exist, we serve, we obey. Bonding is sacred, rare. To seek it outside our kind, she trailed off, her voice tightening. It is treason. He frowned, shifting to face her. Treason? So you're what, a fugitive? Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she nodded once, almost imperceptibly. I was a scientist among my kind. I studied the threads, the bonds that tie souls. I believed they could stretch beyond our species, beyond our laws. I was wrong to think they would forgive me. Jake's stomach twisted. So they kick you out? Exiled, she corrected, her tone flat but heavy with something unspoken. Cast into the void to wander. I thought I would fade until I heard you. There was again that impossible claim. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice low. Arya, I don't get it. How could you hear me? I'm just me. I sit here, I code, I sleep. I don't send signals across the damn galaxy. She turned to him, her eyes shimmering with quiet intensity. You do not need to send, she said. You simply are. Your essence, it resonates. It reached me when nothing else could. He shook his head, half laughing in disbelief. That's not an answer. What's my essence? What makes me so special? Arya hesitated, then slid closer on the couch. The movement was subtle, but it brought her near enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her. Let me show you, she whispered. Before he could respond, she reached out, her hand resting lightly on his chest, just over his heart. Her touch was gentle, but the moment her fingers pressed against him, a jolt shot through his body. Sharp, warm, electric. His breath caught, and his vision blurred. Suddenly, he wasn't in the apartment anymore. Images flooded his mind, flashes of a world he'd never seen. Violet skies streaked with golden clouds. Towers of shimmering glass stretching into the heavens. Faces, Netherian faces, cold and distant, their eyes hollow. And then a laboratory, sleek, sterile, filled with glowing vials and humming machines. Arya stood there, younger somehow, her markings faint as she worked. She was alone, her hands trembling as she injected something into a sample. Human DNA, he realized with a start. The scene shifted, violent and fast. Shouts, accusations, her exile. She was cast out, drifting through the void, her glow fading, until a sound, a faint, desperate hum, pulled her back. It was him, his dreams, his restless nights, his unspoken longing. She followed it like a lifeline. The vision snapped away as quickly as it had come. Jake gasped, lurching back against the couch, his chest heaving. Arya's hand lingered on him, her markings pulsing wildly, and he could still feel her, the ache of her loneliness, the weight of her exile. It wasn't just a memory. It was her, raw and open, spilling into him. What the hell was that? He rasped, his voice shaking. Arya pulled her hand back, her glow dimming as she curled into herself. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to overwhelm you. That was me, my past, and how I found you. He stared at her, his heart racing. You're saying I'm connected to that? To you. She nodded, her eyes glistening. Long ago, my kind experimented with human essence, your DNA. They sought to understand your resilience, your chaos. I was part of it. One experiment survived, its thread passed down through generations. You, Jake, you carry it. That's why I heard you. That's why you dream of stars. His mouth went dry. You're telling me I'm what? Part alien. Not alien, she said quickly. Human, but touched by us. A spark buried deep. It woke when I came near. Jake ran a hand over his face, his mind reeling. It was insane, science fiction bullshit. And yet, those dreams, the ones that had haunted him since he was a kid, of endless skies and distant lights, suddenly made sense. He looked at her, his voice barely steady. So, that's why you want to bond with me? Because of some old experiment? No, she said, her tone fierce. She shifted closer, her knee brushing his thigh, and the contact sent a shiver through him, subtle but undeniable. I want it because of you. The thread chose us. The universe chose us. I crossed the stars not for an experiment, but for the soul that called to me. He couldn't breathe. Her words hit him hard, stirring something deep in his chest, a longing he'd buried under years of solitude. She was so close now, her warmth seeping into him, her glow reflecting in his eyes. He wanted to pull away, to think, but his body wouldn't move. "And if we do this," he asked, his voice low, "what happens to me?" Aria's gaze softened, but there was a flicker of fear behind it. "You'll change," she said. "We'll merge mind, body, soul. You'll feel me, know me, as I will know you. But humans, you value your separateness, your freedom. I won't take that from you unless you choose it." He swallowed, his throat tight. "And if I don't, then I go," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "And you remain as you are." The room fell silent, the drizzle outside the only sound. Jake's head spun, but beneath the chaos, he felt it. The truth of her words, the weight of the choice. He didn't want her to go. He couldn't explain it, but the thought of her leaving carved a hollow space inside him. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted, his voice raw. "But I don't want you to leave." Aria's eyes widened, her glow flaring briefly. She reached for his hand, her fingers brushing his palm, and the touch was like fire, soft, warm, spreading through him until his skin tingled. "Then let me stay," she said, her voice a plea and a promise. He nodded, barely aware of it, his hand closing around hers. Her markings pulsed under his grip, and for a moment he felt her again, not a vision, but a whisper of her presence, wrapping around his mind like a quiet flame. It was intoxicating, overwhelming, and he didn't pull away. The night stretched on, the boundaries between them blurring. Aria stayed close, her curiosity about his world giving way to quieter moments. Moments where her hand lingered on his arm, or her shoulder brushed his as they sat together. Once, as she leaned forward to adjust the blanket they'd pulled over the couch, her hair fell across his chest, and her side pressed against him, soft and warm through her thin garment. Jake's breath hitched, his body reacting before his mind could catch up, a flush creeping up his neck. She didn't notice, or didn't comment, but her glow flickered, and he wondered if she felt it too. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the window, Jake knew something had shifted. Aria wasn't just a visitor anymore. She was part of him, whether he was ready for it or not. And as the city woke outside, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The first rays of dawn crept through the rain-streaked windows, painting Jake's apartment in a pale, watery light. The drizzle had stopped, leaving behind a stillness that felt too quiet, too fragile. Jake sat on the couch, his head tilted back, eyes half closed from exhaustion. Aria was beside him, her silver hair spilling over the armrest, her glow softened to a faint shimmer in the morning haze. The blanket they'd shared during the night lay tangled between them, a silent witness to the hours they'd spent talking, questioning, and, somehow, connecting. He hadn't slept, not really. How could he, with her here, unraveling his world piece by piece? Her words still echoed in his mind. You carry it. A spark buried deep. The idea that he was tied to her people, to some long-forgotten experiment, should have freaked him out. It did on some level, but there was another part of him, a quieter, deeper part, that fell, right? Like the dreams he'd had since he was a kid, the ones of stars and endless skies weren't just random. They were a call, and Aria was the answer. He glanced at her. She was staring at the ceiling, her expression distant, lost in thoughts he couldn't reach. "You okay?" he asked, his voice rough from the long night. She turned her head, her eyes meeting his. "I am uncertain," she said softly. "Being here, with you, it is more than I expected, more than I was prepared for." Jake's lips twitched into a half-smile. "Yeah, tell me about it." "I didn't exactly plan on meeting an alien scientist last night." Her glow flickered, and she smiled back, a small, real smile that made his chest tighten. "Nor I a human who dreams of stars." For a moment, they just looked at each other, the silence warm and heavy. Then, without thinking, Jake reached out, his hand brushing hers where it rested on the couch. Her fingers were cool, soft, and the contact sent a familiar shiver through him. Quiet but sharp, like static under his skin. Her markings pulsed faintly, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her hand, letting their fingers lace together, her warmth seeping into him. It wasn't much, but it felt like everything, a tether in the chaos she'd brought into his life. The moment broke when his phone buzzed on the coffee table, loud and jarring. Jake sighed, reluctantly letting go of her hand to grab it. The screen lit up with a text from Ryan, his best friend and sometimes coding partner. "You up? Need to talk. Big job came through." "Friend of yours?" Arya asked, her head tilting as she watched him. "Yeah," Jake said, typing a quick reply. "Ryan. We've known each other since college. He's a tech geek like me. Helps me out on bigger projects when I'm swamped." She nodded, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Caution. "Maybe. You trust him?" Jake paused, frowning. "Of course. Why wouldn't I?" Arya didn't answer right away. She sat up, pulling the blanket closer, her glow dimming slightly. "My kind, we sense intentions. Not always clearly, but enough. Be careful, Jake." He opened his mouth to argue. Ryan was solid, dependable, the guy who'd pulled him through late-night coding marathons with pizza and bad jokes. But the seriousness in her voice stopped him. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll keep an eye out." The unease lingered, though, settling into his bones like the damp air outside. He shook it off, standing to stretch. "I need coffee. You want anything? Water, maybe? Since coffee's apparently regret to you." She smiled again, lighter this time. Water would be acceptable. He headed to the kitchen, grabbing a glass from the sink and filling it. As he turned to bring it back, he caught sight of her standing by the window, her silhouette framed against the gray Seattle skyline. The way she moved, graceful, almost weightless, still took his breath away. He crossed the room, holding out the glass, but as she reached for it, their hands brushed again. This time, her fingers slid against his wrist, and her body shifted closer, close enough that her hip pressed lightly against his. The contact was fleeting, but it hit him hard, the softness of her curves, the warmth radiating through her thin garment. His pulse spiked, a flush creeping up his neck, and he stepped back, muttering an awkward sorry. Arya tilted her head, her eyes wide and curious. "You apologize often," she said. "Why?" It's a human thing," he stammered, his face hot. He didn't know how to explain that her touch made his skin burn, that every accidental graze was lighting him up in ways he couldn't control. She studied him for a moment, then nodded, taking the glass. "Your reactions, they are strong. I feel them too," faintly. He froze. "You feel them?" "When we touch," she said, her voice soft but steady. "The thread, it grows. Our connection strengthens." Jake's throat tightened. He didn't know whether to be thrilled or terrified. Before he could respond, a sharp knock rattled the door, cutting through the quiet like a blade. He flinched, his nerves already frayed, and glanced at Arya. Her glow dimmed instantly, her body tensing. "Who's that?" he asked, more to himself than her, as he moved toward the door. He peered through the peephole and saw Ryan, tall, lanky, his dark hair messy from the morning damp. Relief washed over him. "It's just Ryan," he said, turning to Arya with a reassuring nod. "No big deal." But her expression didn't soften. She stood, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Jake, it's fine," he cut in, unlocking the door. "He's cool. You'll see." Ryan stepped inside as soon as the door opened, his usual grin plastered across his face. "Man, you look like hell," he said, clapping Jake on the shoulder. "Late night. Something like that," Jake muttered, closing the door. He gestured toward the couch. "This is Arya. She's, staying with me for a bit." Ryan's eyes flicked to her, and his grin faltered just for a second. "Hey, nice to meet you," he said, his tone too casual, too forced. He turned back to Jake, lowering his voice. "Got a minute? Outside." Jake frowned. "What's up?" "It's about that job," Ryan said, glancing at Arya again. "Big client. Urgent. Can't talk here." Arya's warning echoed in Jake's head. "Be careful." But he brushed it off. Ryan was his guy. "Sure," he said, grabbing his jacket from the chair. Give me a sec. He turned to Arya, who hadn't moved. Her eyes were locked on Ryan, sharp and unblinking, her glow barely a flicker now. I'll be right back, Jake said, trying to sound confident. Stay here, okay? She didn't respond, but her silence felt louder than words. Jake followed Ryan out into the hall, the door clicking shut behind them. The air was cool, damp, and the faint hum of the city buzzed below. Ryan leaned against the wall, his hands stuffed in his pockets. So what's this job? Jake asked, crossing his arms. Ryan didn't meet his eyes. It's not a job, he said quietly. It's her. Jake's stomach dropped. What? She's not human, Jake, Ryan said, his voice low and urgent. I've been tracking her kind for months. They're dangerous, and they're coming for her right now. Jake's blood ran cold. What the hell are you talking about? Tracking her? Ryan finally looked at him, his expression hard. I didn't want to drag you into this, man, but she showed up here with you. They paid me to find her, and now they know where she is. Before Jake could process it, a low, resonant hum vibrated through the air, not a sound, but a pressure deep and unsettling. The lights in the hallway flickered, then died. Jake spun toward the door, his heart pounding. Arya. They're here, Ryan whispered, stepping back. I'm sorry, Jake. The hallway plunged into darkness, the flickering lights replaced by an eerie, pulsing silence. Jake's breath caught in his throat as the low hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls, the floor, his bones. It wasn't just noise, it was power, raw and alien, pressing against him like a physical force. He turned to Ryan, his fists clenched, fury and disbelief warring in his chest. What did you do? He growled, his voice shaking. Ryan took another step back, his face pale in the dim emergency lighting. I didn't have a choice, Jake, he said, his words tumbling out fast. They contacted me months ago, offered me a way off this rock, a ship, a new life. All I had to do was watch for her kind. I didn't know it'd be you caught up in it. You sold her out, Jake snapped, advancing on him. You sold me out. Ryan raised his hands, defensive. They're not human, man. They're dangerous. Experiments, weapons, whatever she told you, it's a lie. I was protecting you. Jake's fist shot out before he could think, slamming into Ryan's jaw. The impact sent Ryan staggering against the wall, a grunt escaping him as he clutched his face. Protecting me? Jake spat. You brought them here. The hum spiked, sharp and deafening, cutting off Ryan's reply. Jake spun toward the door, his heart hammering. Arya. He had to get to her. He lunged for the handle, but before his fingers could close around it, the door exploded inward. With splintered, metal twisted, and a wave of dust and smoke billowed into the hall. Jake stumbled back, coughing, his ears ringing from the blast. Through the haze, 3 figures emerged, tall, sleek, their forms shimmering like liquid starlight. Netherians, but not like Arya. Their skin glowed with cold, jagged patterns, sharp as frostbite, and their eyes burned with a harsh, unyielding light. They moved with predatory grace, stepping into the apartment as if the wreckage was nothing to them. The leader, a towering figure with markings like cracked ice, fixed his gaze on Jake, then shifted it past him toward the living room. Arya, the leader said, his voice a low vibration that rattled the air. You've broken the covenant. Jake's blood ran cold. He didn't wait to hear more. He shoved past the debris, scrambling into the apartment. Arya, he shouted, his voice raw. She was still by the window, her glow dim and flickering, her body rigid with fear. She turned to him, her eyes wide, and in that moment he felt it, a spike of panic, sharp and cold, rushing through him. It wasn't his. It was hers, bleeding into him through whatever thread tied them together. Jake, she breathed, her voice trembling. They found me. The enforcers advanced, their steps silent but heavy with intent. Jake moved without thinking, planting himself between them and Arya. Stay back, he warned, though his voice cracked with uncertainty. He wasn't a fighter. He barely knew how to throw a punch, as Ryan's bruised jaw could attest. But he'd be damned if he let them take her. The leader tilted his head, regarding Jake like a curious insect. A human, he said, his tone dripping with contempt. And yet, you stand for her. His gaze flicked to Arya, his expression twisting into something darker. You bonded with this creature? You've tainted yourself. Arya's hand gripped Jake's arm, her fingers digging in as she stepped forward. Please, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't choose. You chose. The leader cut in, his voice like a blade. And now you both pay. He raised a hand, and a crackling wave of energy erupted from his palm, searing, white-hot, hurtling toward them. Jake reacted on instinct, shoving Arya behind him and bracing for the hit. But before it could strike, she grabbed him, pulling him down. They hit the floor hard, the blast scorching the air above them, shattering the window into a spray of glass. Jake's shoulder slammed into the hardwood, pain flaring, but Arya's body was pressed against his, her chest heaving, her glow flaring wildly as she shielded him. Stay down, she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. Her arm was draped across his back, her curves soft against him despite the chaos. And for a fleeting second, the heat of her touch cut through the fear. His pulse raced, a mix of adrenaline and something else, something primal, stirred by her closeness. He shook it off, forcing himself to focus. The enforcers closed in, their shadows looming over the wreckage. Jake scrambled to his knees, pulling Arya with him. We need to move, he said, his voice urgent. Now. She nodded, her glow flickering erratically. They won't stop, she said, her eyes darting to the leader. They'll take me back, or kill us both. Then we run, Jake said, his mind racing. He grabbed her hand, hauling her toward the kitchen. The apartment wasn't big, but there was a back door, a narrow exit to the fire escape. If they could make it outside, maybe they could lose them in the city. They stumbled through the debris, the enforcer's hum growing louder behind them. Jake kicked aside a fallen chair, his free hand brushing Arya's waist as he steadied her. The contact was accidental, but her skin was warm, her markings pulsing under his fingers, and a jolt shot through him. Sharp, electric, making his breath hitch. She glanced at him, her eyes wide, and he muttered a quick, sorry, before shoving the back door open. The fire escape groaned under their weight as they burst outside, the damp Seattle air hitting them like a slap. The city stretched out below, gray and sprawling, the Puget Sound glinting faintly in the distance. Jake pulled Arya down the metal stairs, her hand tight in his, but the hum followed, closer now, relentless. He risked a glance back and saw the enforcers stepping onto the platform above, their glowing forms stark against the morning sky. Faster, he urged, his voice hoarse. They hit the ground running, ducking into an alley near the waterfront. The narrow space smelled of salt and rust, lined with old warehouses and forgotten crates. Jake's lungs burned, his legs screaming, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not with her beside him, her glow dimming with every step, her fear bleeding into him like a second heartbeat. They rounded a corner, slipping into the shadow of an abandoned warehouse. Jake pulled Arya behind a stack of crates, his back against the rough wood, her body pressed close as they caught their breath. Her chest rose and fell against his arm, her warmth seeping through his jacket, and he clenched his jaw, fighting the rush of heat that came with it. This wasn't the time, not with death breathing down their necks. They're close, she whispered, her voice trembling. I can feel them. Jake peeked around the crates, his heart sinking. Shadows moved at the alley's entrance. 3 glowing figures, their steps deliberate, unhurried. They knew they had the advantage. He turned back to Arya, his mind racing. Can we fight them? She shook her head, her silver hair sticking to her face. You're human, Jake. They'll tear you apart. He gritted his teeth, frustration boiling over. I'm not leaving you. Her eyes met his, shimmering with something raw, fear, gratitude, maybe more. I know, she said softly, but if they take me, they won't. He cut in, his voice fierce. He didn't know how to stop them, didn't know what he was doing, but he'd figure it out. He had to. The hum grew louder, the air thickening with their presence. Jake tightened his grip on her hand, his resolve hardening. Whatever came next, he wasn't letting go. The air in the alley was thick with tension, the faint hum of the Netherian enforcers growing into a low, menacing drone. Jake crouched behind the stack of crates, his back pressed against the damp wood, Aria's body huddled close beside him. Her glow was faint now, flickering like a dying ember, and her breath came in shallow gasps. He could feel her fear pulsing through him, sharp, cold, a mirror to his own. But there was something else, too, a quiet resolve, a strength he hadn't noticed before. It steadied him, even as his heart pounded against his ribs. The shadows at the alley's entrance shifted, and the three enforcers stepped into view. Their glowing forms cut through the morning haze, their cold, jagged markings stark against the gray Seattle backdrop. The leader, the one with eyes like frozen stars, moved ahead, his gaze sweeping the narrow space with predatory calm. Jake tightened his grip on Aria's hand, his mind racing for a plan. Running wasn't an option anymore. They were cornered, boxed in by rusting warehouses and the relentless hum of their pursuers. "We can't hide," he whispered, his voice low and urgent. "They'll find us." Aria's fingers squeezed his, her touch cool but firm. "They already have," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "They sense me. The bond, it's too strong now." Jake's stomach twisted. The bond. That invisible thread she'd talked about, the one tying them together, was leading these bastards straight to her. To them. He cursed under his breath, his free hand clenching into a fist. "Then we fight," he said, the words spilling out before he could second-guess them. "I'm not letting them take you." Her eyes widened, shimmering with a mix of fear and something softer. "Jake, you can't." "I can," he cut in, his tone fierce. "I don't know how, but I'm not losing you. Not after all this." She stared at him, her glow flaring briefly, and for a moment, the world shrank to just the two of them. The damp alley, the enforcers, the city fading into the background. Then the leader's voice shattered the silence, cold and resonant. "Step aside, human. This does not concern you." Jake stood, pulling Arya up with him, his jaw set. "Like hell it doesn't," he shot back, stepping in front of her. "She's not going anywhere with you." The leader's eyes narrowed, a flicker of amusement crossing his face. "Brave," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Foolish, but brave." He raised a hand, and the air crackled with energy, white-hot, searing, the same force that had nearly hit them in the apartment. Jake braced himself, his muscles tensing, but Arya moved faster. She grabbed his arm, yanking him sideways as the blast tore through the crates, splintering wood and sending shards flying. They hit the ground hard, rolling behind a rusted dumpster. Jake's elbows scraped the pavement, pain flaring, but he barely noticed. Arya was pressed against him, her body trembling, her glow pulsing erratically. "You okay?" he asked, his voice rough. She nodded, her silver hair tangled across her face. "For now," she whispered, "but they won't stop." He peeked around the dumpster, his heart sinking. The enforcers were closing in, their steps slow and deliberate, like hunters savoring the chase. The leader raised his hand again, but this time, Jake didn't wait. He grabbed a jagged piece of wood from the wreckage and hurled it at the enforcer, not aiming to hit, just to distract. It worked. The leader flinched, the energy faltering, and Jake seized the moment. "Move!" he barked, hauling Arya to her feet. They darted deeper into the alley, ducking behind another stack of crates. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he kept going, her hand tight in his. The hum followed, relentless, and he knew they were running out of time. They needed a way out, or a way to fight back. Arya stumbled, her glow dimming further, and Jake caught her before she fell. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close, and for a split second, he felt it, the softness of her body against his, the warmth of her skin through her thin garment. His hand brushed the curve of her hip, her markings flaring under his touch, and a rush of heat shot through him, sharp and distracting. He shook it off, his face flushing, and steadied her. "You good?" he asked, his voice tight. She nodded, her breath ragged. "I'm weakening," she admitted. "They're draining me," through the bond. Jake's blood ran cold. Draining you? How? They're Netherian, she said, her eyes darting to the shadows. They can sever threads, cut the connection. It's killing me. He cursed, his mind racing. If they were targeting her through the bond, then maybe... What about me? He asked, gripping her shoulders. You said I'm part of this, part of you. Can I do anything? Her eyes searched his, wide and desperate. You're human, she said. But the spark, it's awake now. If you let it. She didn't finish. A second enforcer lunged from the side, faster than Jake could track, its glowing hand slashing toward Arya. Jake reacted on instinct, shoving her back and swinging his fist. It connected, barely, grazing the enforcer's arm, but the impact sent a shockwave up his own, a jolt of energy that wasn't his. The enforcer staggered, surprised, and Jake stared at his hand, stunned. His skin tingled, faint traces of light pulsing where he'd struck. What the? He muttered, but there was no time to process it. The leader advanced, his energy crackling again, and this time, Arya stepped forward. No, she cried, throwing herself between Jake and the blast. It hit her square in the chest, and she crumpled, her glow flaring bright, then fading to a dull shimmer. Arya! Jake roared, dropping to his knees beside her. Her body was limp, her eyes fluttering, and a searing pain ripped through him. Not physical, but deeper, like his soul was tearing apart. He felt her fear, her agony, her fading strength, flooding into him through the bond. Stay with me, he pleaded, cradling her face. Don't you dare leave me. Her hand reached for his, weak but trembling. Jake, she whispered, her voice breaking. The bond, it's complete. Before he could ask what she meant, a surge erupted inside him, blinding, white-hot, exploding through his veins. His vision blurred, his skin burned, and then he saw it. Faint, glowing patterns blossoming across his arms, mirroring hers. The enforcers froze, their cold eyes narrowing in confusion. Jake gasped, his body trembling as the energy settled, raw and unfamiliar, like it had always been there, waiting. What's happening? He rasped, staring at his hands. Arya's voice echoed in his mind, faint but urgent. You're becoming one of us. The bond, it's awake. The leader snarled, his voice rippling with fury. Impossible. He lunged, faster than before, his hand slashing toward Jake's chest. But Jake moved, instinctively impossibly fast, blocking the strike with his forearm. The impact sent a shock wave through the alley, cracking the pavement beneath them. He didn't know how he'd done it, didn't understand the strength surging through him, but it was there, real, powerful, and growing. The enforcer reeled back, his markings flaring with rage. You're an abomination, he spat. A human tainted by her. Jake stood, pulling Arya behind him, his voice steady despite the chaos. Then come get me, he said, his fists clenched, the light in his skin pulsing brighter. The alley erupted into chaos, light and fury clashing as the enforcers closed in. Jake didn't know what he was doing, didn't know how to fight, but the bond guided him. Arya's instincts merging with his, her strength fueling him. He dodged a strike, countered with a blow that shouldn't have been possible, and felt the tide shifting. For the first time, he wasn't just running. He was fighting back. The alley was a battlefield of light and shadow, the air thick with the crackle of energy and the sharp tang of scorched metal. Jake stood in the center of it, his chest heaving, his arms glowing with faint, shifting patterns that mirrored Arya's. The Netherian enforcers circled him, their cold, jagged markings flaring with fury, but there was hesitation in their movements now, uncertainty where there'd once been arrogance. Jake didn't know what he was doing, didn't understand the power surging through him, but it didn't matter. It was there, alive and burning, and he'd use it to protect her. Arya lay crumpled behind him, her glow barely a whisper, her silver hair splayed across the cracked pavement. The sight of her, broken, fading, lit a fire in his gut, hotter than the energy pulsing in his veins. He'd felt her collapse through the bond, her pain ripping in him like a knife, and it fueled him now, driving him forward when every muscle screamed to stop. The leader lunged again, his hand slashing through the air with a burst of searing light. Jake ducked, the blast grazing his shoulder, singeing his jacket. Pain flared, but he gritted his teeth and swung back, his fist connecting with the enforcer's chest. The impact was impossibly strong, stronger than it should have been, and the enforcer staggered, a ripple of energy exploding outward, cracking the warehouse wall beside them. Jake stared at his glowing fist, stunned, but there was no time to think. The second enforcer was already on him, moving like a blur, its hand aimed for his throat. He didn't dodge in time. The blow caught his side, sending him sprawling into a pile of crates. Wood splintered under him, and a sharp ache bloomed in his ribs, but the bond kicked in, Aria's instincts guiding him, her reflexes sharpening his own. He rolled to his feet, countering with a wild swing that caught the enforcer off guard. It stumbled, and Jake pressed the advantage, slamming his shoulder into its chest, driving it back. "Jake!" Aria's voice cut through the chaos, weak but desperate. He glanced back, his heart lurching. The third enforcer had her, its glowing hand wrapped around her arm, pinning her to the ground. Her markings flickered, dimming with every second, and he felt it, her strength draining, her life slipping away. The bond screamed inside him, a raw, aching pull that drowned out everything else. "Let her go!" he roared, charging toward them. The leader intercepted, blocking his path with a wave of energy that knocked him back. He hit the pavement hard, his breath rushing out, but he scrambled up, his vision blurring with rage. Aria's pain was as now, a second heartbeat fading in his chest, and he couldn't lose her. Not like this. The enforcer holding her tightened its grip, its voice a low hiss. "Her thread ends here," it said, raising its free hand. A pulse of light gathered, sharp and lethal, aimed at her chest. "No!" Jake shouted, his voice breaking. He didn't think. He just moved, shoving past the leader with a strength he didn't know he had. The enforcer turned, too slow, and Jake tackled it, wrenching its arm away from Aria. They hit the ground together, rolling in a tangle of limbs and light. The enforcer's energy lashed out, burning his side, but he held on, pinning it down with everything he had. Aria gasped, free but barely conscious, her hand reaching for him. "Jake!" she whispered, her voice a thread of sound. He met her eyes, and in that moment he felt her, truly felt her. Her fear, her longing, the centuries of solitude she'd carried, all pouring into him through the bond. And then, something else, a surge of warmth, fierce and unshakable. Love, not the fragile humankind, but something vast, inevitable, written into the stars themselves. "Hold on," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He turned back to the enforcer, slamming his fist into its chest. The light in his skin flared, and the blow sent a shockwave rippling through the alley, forcing the enforcer back. But there were still two more, and he was running out of steam. The leader advanced, his markings blazing with fury. "You cannot win," he snarled. "You're nothing, a human playing at power." Jake stood, his legs shaky but his resolve iron. "Try me," he spat, raising his fists. The light in his arms pulsed brighter, fueled by Aria's fading strength, and he lunged. The fight was a blur, dodging, striking, countering with a precision he shouldn't have had. The bond guided him, her instincts merging with his, but it wasn't enough. The enforcers were too fast, too strong, and he was human, spark or not. He was reaching his limit. Then he heard her voice, soft, trembling, but clear. "Jake, let me help." He turned, his breath ragged. Aria was on her knees, her hands pressed to the ground, her glow flaring one last time, bright, wild, blinding. "What are you?" he started, but she cut him off. "I can't fight them," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "But you can." She reached out, her hand trembling as it found his chest. The moment she touched him, a pulse of light exploded between them, warm, endless, wrapping around him like a flame. Her body pressed against his, her chest soft against his ribs, her breath hot on his neck as she poured everything into him. He felt her, every inch of her, every heartbeat, and a rush of energy surged through him, raw and overwhelming. His skin burned, his markings flared, and for a heartbeat, he was lost in her, the world fading to just her warmth, her strength, her sacrifice. "Arya, no!" he shouted, but it was too late. The light drained from her, her glow fading to nothing as she slumped against him, her body limp. The enforcers froze, their eyes widening in shock, and Jake felt it, the full weight of her power, her essence flooding into him. His vision cleared, his pain vanished, replaced by a strength he couldn't comprehend. He stood, Arya cradled in his arms, and faced the enforcers. "You're done," he said, his voice low, dangerous. The light in his skin blazed, white-hot and furious, and he let it go. Energy erupted from him in a wave, blasting the enforcers back. The alley shook, walls cracking, crates shattering, and the enforcers hit the ground hard, groaning as their glow dimmed. Jake collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, the light in his skin flickering out. He felt hollow, drained, like he'd burned himself up to save her. Arya was still in his arms, her head resting against his shoulder, her breath shallow, but there. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please." Her eyes fluttered open, faint but alive, and she smiled. A weak, radiant smile that cut through the chaos. "We survived," she murmured, her hand brushing his cheek. "That's enough." The enforcers stirred, their leader struggling to rise, his voice a growl. "This isn't over," he said, his markings flaring weakly. "You've only delayed." "Yes, it is," Arya interrupted, her voice steady despite her frailty. She looked at Jake, her eyes shimmering with trust, and he knew she was right. The enforcers exchanged a glance, then vanished in a flicker of light, leaving only silence behind. Jake slumped against the crate, holding her close, his body aching but his heart lighter than it should have been. "Are you okay?" he murmured, brushing her hair from her face. She laughed softly, a sound laced with relief. "I am now," she said, her hand resting on his chest where the markings still glowed faintly. "You saved me." He shook his head, his throat tight. "We saved each other." The alley was a graveyard of silence, the echoes of battle swallowed by the damp Seattle morning. Jake sat slumped against the crate, his arms wrapped around Arya, her fragile form pressed against his chest. The air smelled of burnt metal and salt, the faint hum of the city stirring beyond the warehouse walls. His body ached, every muscle, every bone, but he barely felt it. All he could focus on was her, the shallow rise and fall of her breath, the faint glow flickering back in her skin, the way her silver hair spilled across his shoulder like a lifeline tethering him to reality. The enforcers were gone, vanished in that flicker of light, but their final words lingered. "This isn't over," a promise of something darker waiting on the horizon. Jake didn't care. Not now. Not with Arya alive, her warmth seeping into him, her presence steadying the chaos in his mind. He'd fought for her, burned for her, and somehow they'd made it through. That was enough. Her eyes fluttered open, faint but clear, and she looked up at him. "Jake," she whispered, her voice soft, cracked with exhaustion. Her hand brushed his cheek, trembling but deliberate, and the touch sent a shiver through him. Quiet, warm, a reminder of the bond that had saved them both. "You're okay," he said, his voice rough with relief. He tightened his hold on her, his thumb brushing her jaw. "You're still here." She smiled, a small, radiant thing that lit up her pale face. "Because of you," she murmured. "We're one now in every way." He swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. The markings on his arms, faint, glowing traces that matched hers, weren't just a fluke. They were permanent, a sign of what they'd become. He could feel her, not just physically, but deeper, a hum at the back of his mind, a warmth that wasn't his alone. The bond had completed when she'd poured her strength into him, when she'd nearly sacrificed everything to keep him alive. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and he didn't know how to process it. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice low, unsteady. "For us." Arya shifted in his arms, her body weak but insistent as she sat up slightly. Her hand slid down to his chest, resting over his heart, and the glow on her markings pulsed faintly under her fingers. "It means we share everything," she said. "Thoughts, feelings, strength. You're part of me, Jake, and I'm part of you. There's no going back." He exhaled shakily, his hand covering hers. Her skin was soft, warmer now, and the contact stirred something in him, a quiet ache, a pull that went beyond the fight, beyond the fear. "I don't want to go back," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not if it means losing this." Her eyes shimmered, wide and searching, and for a moment they just sat there, the world still, the bond pulsing between them like a living thing. Then, without warning, she leaned into him, her forehead pressing against his. Their breaths mingled, her closeness overwhelming, and Jake felt a rush of heat, her presence wrapping around him, her essence seeping into his soul. It wasn't just comfort. It was her raw, unguarded, and his. The moment stretched, fragile and perfect, until a distant rumble broke through the silence. Jake's head snapped up, his gaze darting to the alley's entrance. Smoke curled into the sky from somewhere downtown, faint but growing, and the sound of sirens wailed in the distance. The city was waking up, oblivious to the war that had just torn through its shadows. "They're gone," Arya said, her voice steady despite her frailty. "For now." Jake looked back at her, his jaw tightening. "For now," he echoed. "But they'll be back, won't they?" She nodded, her expression clouding. "They won't forgive this, what we've become. No Netherian has bonded with a human before. They'll see it as a threat, an aberration. And you," she hesitated, her hand tightening on his chest. "You're more than human now. They'll come for you too." His stomach twisted, but he forced a grim smile. "Let them try," he said, his tone harder than he felt. "I've got you. We'll figure it out." Her lips curved, faint but real, and she leaned against him again, her head resting on his shoulder. "We will," she murmured. Together. They stayed like that for a while, the morning light creeping higher, casting long shadows across the alley. Jake's mind raced, questions, fears, plans, but he pushed them aside. He focused on her instead, the weight of her against him, the slow rhythm of her breathing syncing with his. The bond hummed between them, a quiet reassurance that whatever came next, they weren't alone. Eventually, he helped her stand, his arm around her waist as they moved toward the warehouse door. She was unsteady, her glow still faint, but she leaned into him, her trust unspoken but palpable. As they stepped inside, the dim interior swallowed them, the damp air cool against his skin. He guided her to an old crate, easing her down, and knelt in front of her. "You need rest," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We both do." She nodded, but her eyes lingered on his, searching. "You've changed," she said softly. "I felt it when the bond woke. You're stronger now. Different." He glanced at his arms, the markings faint but undeniable. "Yeah," he said, flexing his hand. "I don't know what I am anymore." "You're still you," she said, her voice firm. "Human, brave, stubborn." The spark just amplified it. He chuckled, the sound rough but genuine. "Stubborn, huh? Guess that's fair." Her smile widened, and she reached for his hand again, her fingers brushing his palm. The touch was light, but it sent a shiver through him, warm, electric, stirring that same quiet ache. Her markings flared softly, and he couldn't help it. His hand slid up her arm, resting on her shoulder, his thumb grazing the curve of her collarbone. Her breath hitched, her body trembling slightly, and she whispered, "You feel it too." "Yeah," he said, his voice low, his face flushing. Every time. She leaned closer, her thigh pressing against his where he knelt, and the contact was subtle but intense, her warmth seeping through, her glow flickering in response. "It's the bond," she murmured, her voice trembling with something deeper. "You touch me like I'm yours." He froze, his pulse racing, but he didn't pull away. "Maybe you are," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Her eyes widened, shimmering with emotion, and for a heartbeat, he thought she might kiss him. But then the air shifted, a low, resonant hum, not in the alley but everywhere, vibrating through the walls, the floor, the sky. Jake tensed, standing quickly, his hand still on her shoulder. "What's that?" Aria's glow dimmed, her face paling. "Them," she whispered. "Not here, but close." Before he could ask more, a voice cut through the hum, cold, disembodied, echoing in his mind as much as his ears. "The seed has sprouted," it said, sharp and final. "He will be the harbinger of ruin." The sound faded, leaving only silence, but the weight of it lingered, heavy and ominous. Jake's blood ran cold. What the hell was that? Aria's hand found his, gripping tight. "A warning," she said, her voice shaking. "From my people. They know what you've become, what we've become. You're not just a human to them now. You're a weapon." He stared at her, his mind reeling. "A weapon. They fear you," she said, her eyes locked on his. "The bond, it's changed you in ways they can't predict. Ways I can't predict. And they'll hunt us, both of us, until they destroy what we are." Jake's jaw clenched, his resolve hardening. "Then we fight," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "Whatever it takes." She nodded, her grip tightening, and leaned into him again, her forehead against his chest. "Whatever it takes," she echoed, her voice a promise. The city loomed beyond the warehouse, gray and restless, but Jake didn't care. He held her close, the bond pulsing between them. Unbreakable, eternal. They weren't two anymore. They were one. And whatever storm was coming, they'd face it together.